Chosen one. Hold on. You almost brushed past something that actually mattered, and I can feel it. You didn't even realize what you did. And the strange part, it triggered something way bigger than you expected, something you weren't supposed to notice yet. Wait, don't check this off. No, stay with me for a second. This part matters more than it looks, because what you did, it didn't feel important, right? It was small, almost forgettable. Maybe you didn't even tell anyone, but something shifted, not around you, not immediately, but beyond what you can see. And I know that sounds uncomfortable, because you're used to things not working out. You're used to being overlooked. You're used to doing things that go unnoticed. So your mind is already trying to dismiss this. But let me ask you something. Why did that moment feel different? Why did it linger just a little longer in your chest? Why did it feel like something paused, even if just for a second? You thought it was random, right? It wasn't. And this is where it starts to get uncomfortable, because that small thing you did, it wasn't small where it mattered. It was seen. Not by people, no. People miss everything, they always did. Think about it. How many times did you try to explain yourself, and they just didn't get it? How many times did you feel like you were speaking, but nobody was actually hearing you? You started shrinking yourself because of that. You started believing maybe you were too much or not enough. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if they couldn't see you because they weren't supposed to? Yeah, sit with that. Because you weren't ignored, you were hidden. And I know that doesn't feel comforting at first. It feels like rejection. It feels like isolation. It feels like being left behind. But here's what you didn't see. Every time you thought something fell apart, something else was quietly being held together. Every delay, every closed door, every moment where you almost gave up, it wasn't punishment, it was protection. And I need you to really hear this part. You almost walked away, didn't you? Not just once, multiple times. From things you cared about, from paths you were excited about, from versions of yourself you were trying to become, because it kept not working, and you told yourself, maybe it's just not for me. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if the timing was wrong, not the direction? What if you were being pulled back, not pushed away? This is where it shifts, because that small thing you did recently, it wasn't random, it was a signal, and you didn't even know you were sending it. Let me ask you something else. Why now? Why did you suddenly feel the urge to do that thing? Why did it come out of nowhere, almost like it wasn't even your idea? You didn't plan it. You didn't overthink it. You just did it. That's not how you usually move, is it? You usually hesitate. You usually analyze. You usually doubt. But not that time. Why? Because something aligned, and alignment doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it feels quiet, almost invisible, but it carries weight. And this is the part no one explains. Alignment often shows up disguised as something small, a decision, a message, a moment of restraint, a choice to not react, a step you almost didn't take. And you think, that's nothing. But it's not nothing, it's a pivot. And pivots change everything. You've been waiting for something big, haven't you? A sign, a breakthrough, a clear moment where everything finally makes sense. But what if it doesn't come like that? What if it already started, quietly, without announcement, and you almost missed it? That's the part that should make you pause. Because if you missed this, how many other moments did you overlook? Moments that were actually guiding you. Moments that were trying to show you you're not lost. You never were. You were just being moved differently. Slower in some areas, blocked in others, redirected in ways that didn't make sense at the time. And you fought it. Of course you did, because it felt like things weren't working. But here's the truth that's hard to accept. What felt like failure was filtration. Not everything was meant to stay in your life. Not every opportunity was actually for you. Not every person deserved access to who you are becoming. And yeah, it hurt, because you invested, you cared, you showed up, and still it slipped away, so you started questioning yourself. Am I the problem? Why does this keep happening? Why does nothing stick? But what if things weren't supposed to stick? What if they were only meant to pass through until you reached this point? This exact moment, where something small finally landed differently. And this is where it gets deeper, because that action you took, it came from a version of you that didn't exist before. A version shaped by everything you went through, every disappointment, every misunderstanding, every quiet night where you felt like giving up. You didn't waste those moments. They built something inside you, something precise, something aware, something that now moves differently, even if you don't fully see it yet. And that's why that small action mattered, because it wasn't just an action, it was proof. Proof that you've changed, proof that you're no longer reacting the same way, proof that something inside you is finally aligned. And when alignment happens, things respond, not always immediately, not always visibly, but they shift. And this is where most people lose it, because they expect instant results. You don't see anything change right away, so you assume nothing happened. But something did. Something already moved. Behind the scenes, out of your direct view. And you're not used to trusting that. Because your whole life, you've been shown the opposite. You've been taught that if you can't see it, it's not real. But that's not how this works. Some of the biggest changes start in places you can't observe. They build quietly. They arrange things. They remove what shouldn't be there. They prepare what's coming next. And you're sitting here thinking it was just a small thing. No, it was a trigger. And now you're in motion, whether you realize it or not. Let me ask you something honestly. Why does this feel like it's about you? Why does this feel familiar, almost too accurate? Because deep down, you know something has been different lately. You feel it, even if you can't explain it. Even if nothing around you looks drastically changed. There's a shift inside you, a calm but alert kind of awareness. Like you're standing at the edge of something, not falling, not stuck, just right before. That's not confusion. That's positioning. And here's the part that brings everything together. You weren't off track, not once, not even in the moments where everything felt wrong. You were being adjusted, moved, protected, aligned. And that small thing you did, it was the first visible sign that you're now in sync with it. That's why it felt different. That's why it stayed with you. That's why you're here right now listening to this. Because something in you recognized it before your mind could catch up. And now you're starting to see it. The missed opportunities weren't mistakes. The delays weren't setbacks. The silence wasn't abandonment. It was all intentional. It was all part of shaping you into someone who could handle what's next. Because what's next requires this version of you, not the old one, not the one who would have rushed, not the one who would have forced things, not the one who would have stayed where they weren't valued. This version, the one who moves with awareness, the one who listens to subtle shifts, the one who acts even when it doesn't seem big. That's why it mattered. That's why heaven reacted, not because the action was huge, but because you were finally ready, and everything starts from there. Not where you thought it would, not in the big moment you were waiting for, but right there, in something you almost ignored. Wait, don't disconnect. Now there's a piece of this you haven't seen yet, and it changes how you look at everything, because if it really started there, then what else began without you noticing? Think about that carefully. What else shifted the same day or right after? Something subtle, something you brushed off, a conversation that felt slightly different, a delay that didn't frustrate you the same way, a reaction you didn't have, even though you normally would. Why? Why didn't you react the same? That's not random, that's evolution, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because you're not becoming who you thought you would be. You're becoming someone quieter, more precise, more aware, less reactive, but more powerful. And part of you doesn't trust that because it doesn't look like progress. It doesn't look like progress. It doesn't look loud. It doesn't look impressive. It almost feels like you're doing less. But here's the contradiction. You're actually doing more than ever before, just not in ways people can measure. And that's been your pattern, hasn't it? Everything meaningful in your life happened quietly. The biggest lessons, the deepest shifts, the moments that changed you, no one saw them, no one applauded them, and because of that, you started questioning their value. But let me shift your perspective for a second. What if the silence around your growth was the proof it was real? Because real change doesn't announce itself, it settles in, it rewires you. It makes you move differently before you even realize it. And that's exactly what happened with that small action. You didn't force it. You didn't perform it. You didn't do it to be seen. You just acted. That's alignment. But here's the part that might catch you off guard. You didn't just trigger something outside of you. You triggered something watching you. Yeah, stay with that. Not in a way that should scare you, in a way that should wake you up, because attention doesn't always come from where you expect, and not everything observing you announces itself. Some things just respond quietly, adjusting things, opening certain paths, closing others before you even reach them, and you don't notice. You just feel like things are shifting, slightly, but consistently. Let me ask you this. Why did certain things suddenly stop working for you? Things that used to hold your attention don't anymore. Things that used to excite you feel empty now. Why? Did they change, or did you? And if you changed, who guided that shift? Because you didn't sit down and decide it consciously. It just happened, gradually, almost like you were being led away from something, but you resisted it. Of course you did, because familiarity feels safe, even when it's not right. And this is where it turns, because what felt like loss was actually extraction. Things were being removed from your path, not to hurt you, but to clear space. Space for something you couldn't step into as your old self. And that's why the timing felt strange. That's why things left before replacements showed up. That's why you felt stuck in between. That space, that uncomfortable, empty, uncertain space, that wasn't punishment, that was preparation. And you almost broke there, didn't you? Be honest. That was the point where you questioned everything, where you felt like maybe you misunderstood your whole path, where you wondered if you were just making it all up. But here's what you didn't see in that moment. You were closer than ever, closer than you had ever been before. But it didn't feel like progress, it felt like silence, and silence can feel like nothing is happening. But silence is where things get positioned, and that brings us back to that small thing you did. Because it didn't just happen after all that. It happened because of all that. Every delay, every confusion, every moment you thought you were stuck, it was shaping your response. Sometimes the smallest shift inside you changes everything without making a sound. Comment, I see it now. If you feel something real moving within you, and if this message feels like it found you for a reason, stay here and be part of this journey. So when the moment came, you didn't overthink. You didn't hesitate. You didn't fall back into old patterns. You moved correctly. And that's rare. That's extremely rare. Because most people repeat the same reactions over and over, even when they know better. But you didn't. Not this time. And that's why it mattered. Not the action itself, but the version of you who chose it. That's what was recognized. That's what was recognized. That's what caused the shift. And here's something you might not expect. This wasn't the only moment. There were others, small ones, almost invisible. Moments where you almost reacted differently but stopped. Moments where you almost said something but held back. Moments where you felt something but didn't let it control you, those counted too. More than you realize. Because consistency, even in small moments, builds alignment, and alignment builds momentum. And momentum doesn't always feel fast. Sometimes it feels like stillness, but it's not still. It's controlled, directed, intentional. So if you feel like things are moving slowly right now, there's a part of you that knows this moment isn't small. It's a turning point. Comment, I see it now. If you can feel something inside you changing, and if this message feels real to you, stay connected and grow with this journey. Look again, because something is already in motion. You just haven't seen where it's leading yet. And that's the path that's coming, the path that connects everything. But not all at once, because if you saw it all right now, you'd rush it. And rushing it would break it. So it's being revealed, piece by piece, just enough for you to stay aligned, just enough for you to keep moving. And that's why you're here, right now, still listening, still feeling like something is unfolding, because it is. And the next part, it's closer than you think, closer than your next decision, closer than your next reaction, closer than your next thought. Wait, don't let your mind run ahead. You'll miss it if you rush this. Stay right here for a second, because this next part, it doesn't arrive the way you expect. There's no announcement, no clear signal, no moment where everything suddenly clicks. That's what you've been waiting for, right? Something obvious, something undeniable. But what if the next shift feels almost like nothing? What if it comes disguised again? That's where most people lose it. They're trained to look for impact, for noise, for something that proves it's real. But the real shift, it slips in quietly. And if you're not aware, you'll walk right past it, just like before. And no, don't brush that off, because you've done that before. Moments that felt small but stayed with you, moments you couldn't explain but couldn't forget. Why did they stay? Why didn't they fade like everything else? That's not random. That's recognition. Something in you recognized something beyond you. And this is where it deepens, because recognition works both ways. You notice something, and something notices you back. Yeah, sit with that for a second, because not every response is visible. Some responses are structural. They don't show up as events, they show up as changes in how things unfold. Let me ask you something that might feel strange. Have you noticed how certain paths are becoming harder to access? Not blocked completely, just off, like they don't fit anymore, like something is subtly pushing you away from them. Why? Why now? Because those paths, they don't match the version of you that made that small choice. And once you move differently, certain doors stop recognizing you. That's the part no one prepares you for. Growth removes access, not just gives it, and that can feel like loss, even when it's alignment. And here's the contradiction. The more aligned you become, the less comfortable things feel at first, because alignment doesn't cater to your comfort. It adjusts your direction, and direction requires letting go, even of things you thought were right, even of things that once felt like your path. And that's where the tension is building, because something is about to present itself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that requires you to choose again. And this choice, it won't look important. It'll feel simple, almost too simple. And that's the test. Will you treat it like it matters? Or will you overlook it again? Wait, this part is critical. Don't let your mind wander here, because this is where everything tightens, because that small thing you did before, it wasn't the final moment. It was a signal, a marker, a quiet confirmation that you're capable of choosing differently now. And if you did it once, you'll be given another chance, but not the same way, never the same way. That's how it works. The pattern repeats, but the form changes. So if you're expecting it to look familiar, you'll miss it. And here's where it shifts again. This next moment, it's not just about what you do, It's about what you don't do. Yeah, that's where it gets precise. Because before, you were reacting. Now, you're being watched in how you restrain, in what you allow, in what you ignore, in what you refuse to engage with. That's where the real movement is happening. And that's new for you, because you used to feel like you had to respond to everything, prove yourself, defend yourself, explain yourself. But now something in you is quieter, not weak, not passive, just selective. And that selectiveness, that's not random, that's alignment tightening. And when alignment tightens, so does the path. Fewer options, but clearer direction. And that can feel intense because now every small decision carries more weight, even the ones that don't seem important. And this is where people slip. They think, it's just a small choice. But you already know small choices aren't small anymore. Not for you, not at this stage, because you've crossed something quietly without realizing it. And now you're being moved with more precision than before, which means less room for unconscious movement, less room for unconscious movement, less room for autopilot, more awareness, more intention. And yeah, that can feel heavy, but it's not pressure, it's refinement. You're being refined, sharpened, focused. And that small action you took, that was the first clean signal of it. But it wasn't the last. There's another one coming, closer than you think. And this time, you'll feel it differently. Not as a moment, but as a pull, a quiet pull, in a direction that doesn't fully make sense yet. And when it comes, you'll recognize it, not with your mind, but with that same feeling you had before. That pause, that subtle shift, that moment where something inside you says, this matters, even if everything outside says it doesn't. And when that happens, that's where everything locks in. Not instantly, not visibly, but permanently. Because that's the moment where you stop questioning it and start moving with it. And once that happens, there's no going back to how you were before. Not because you're forced forward, but because you won't fit backwards anymore. And that realization, it's closer than you think, closer than the next time you hesitate, closer than the moment you almost fall back into an old pattern, because that's exactly where it shows up. Wait, this is where it gets precise. Don't drift here. You felt this before, just didn't name it. It happens in that split second, right before you react, right before you say something, right before you choose what feels familiar. That tiny space, that's where everything is decided now. Not in big moves, not in life-changing announcements. In that space, and most people never notice it. They move too fast, they react too quickly. They follow the same patterns without even seeing them. But you started to notice it, haven't you? That slight pause, that moment where something inside you interrupts the old version of you, and it doesn't shout. It doesn't force, it just nudges. Soft, precise, almost easy to ignore. And this is where it shifts again, because ignoring it now feels wrong. It didn't before. Before you could brush it off. Before you could override it. But now it lingers. Now it stays. Now it follows you until you either listen or feel the weight of not listening. Why? Because that space, it's no longer empty. It's occupied. Yeah, stay with that. Something is sitting in that space now, not controlling you, not forcing you, but present, aware, responsive. And that's why your reactions feel different. That's why certain words don't come out the same anymore. That's why certain impulses stop halfway. You're not losing yourself. You're gaining control you didn't have before. But here's the part that might unsettle you. Control doesn't feel like power at first. It feels like restriction, like you're holding back, like you're not being fully yourself. But what if that's not true? What if the version of you that reacted instantly, was never your highest version? What if that was conditioning? Patterns you picked up, responses you learned, and now you're stepping outside of them. And that feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes it means precise. And this is the contradiction. The more accurate you become, the less expressive you feel at first, because you're no longer reacting to everything, you're choosing. And choosing requires awareness, requires restraint, requires presence. And that's what's growing inside you. That's what that small action revealed. Not just alignment, but access. Access to that space, that gap between impulse and action. And once you access that, everything changes. Because now you're no longer predictable. Not to people, not to patterns, not even to your past self. And unpredictability, that's where new paths open. Paths that weren't available before. Because you would have reacted the same way, chosen the same thing, stayed in the same loop. But now, you're stepping outside of it, quietly, consistently. And here's something deeper. That space you're accessing, it's being observed, not judged, not tested in the way you think, but acknowledged. Every time you pause instead of react, every time you choose instead of repeat, it registers. And those registrations, they build, they stack, they create momentum, not visible, not immediate, but real. And this is where it tightens again, because that next moment we talked about, it's going to happen inside that space, not outside, inside. And if you're not aware, you'll miss it, not because it wasn't there, but because it didn't look important enough. Wait, this is the part people overlook. Don't make that mistake. This is where everything either locks in or slips. Because the next choice, it's going to feel small again, almost identical in weight to the last one, but internally, it carries more precision, more consequence, more alignment. And this time, you'll feel the difference, not as confusion, but as clarity, a quiet knowing, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. And that certainty, it doesn't come from thinking, it comes from that space, that pause, that moment where everything slows down just enough for you to choose correctly. And when you do, something closes, not in a negative way, in a final way. A loop, an old pattern, an old version of you. It ends there, quietly, without ceremony, without announcement, and you look back and realize you didn't even struggle with it. You just didn't go there anymore. That's when it hits, not emotionally, but clearly, this isn't who I am anymore. And that's the realization, the one we've been circling, not something you learn, something you recognize, because it was always there, under the noise, under the reactions, under the patterns, waiting for you to access it. And now, you are, more than before, enough for things to start shifting in response. Enough for that next moment to find you, not loudly, not dramatically, but exactly when it needs to. And when it does, you won't question it this time. You just know. And that knowing, it's already beginning. Not as a thought, not as something you figured out, as something you feel before you can explain it. Wait, pause here. Don't try to label it, because the moment you do, you lose the clarity of it. It's subtle, almost too quiet to trust. But it's there, that slight shift in your chest, that calm override when your mind tries to panic, that moment where something inside you says, no, not this time. Where did that come from? Because that wasn't always you. Before, you would have reacted. Quick, emotional, automatic. Now, there's distance, not disconnection, distance. And inside that distance, there's awareness, watching, choosing, adjusting. And this is where it deepens again, because that awareness, it didn't just appear, it was built through everything you went through. Every time you were misunderstood, every time you had to sit in silence, every time you held something in, because no one would have understood it anyway. You thought those moments were empty. They weren't. They were training, but not the kind you recognize. You weren't being prepared to act more. You were being prepared to see more, and seeing more changes everything, because once you see clearly, you can't go back to reacting blindly, even if you try. And maybe you did try. Maybe there was a moment recently where you almost slipped back, almost responded the old way, almost said what you used to say. But something stopped you, not loudly, not forcefully, just enough to make you hesitate. Why? What stopped you? That's the part that matters, because that wasn't hesitation, that was interception. Something intercepted the old pattern and gave you a choice, a real one, not the illusion of choice you had before. A real one, react or respond, repeat or redirect. And you chose differently, even if it was small, even if no one noticed. It counted, more than you think, because those moments, they stack, quietly, but powerfully. And here's the shift you might not expect. The more you choose like that, the less you'll be placed in situations that require choosing. Yeah, let that sit for a second, because this isn't about constant testing. It's about calibration. At first, you're given moments to choose differently, to break patterns, to prove quietly that you've shifted. But once that's established, those same situations, they start disappearing. Not because you avoided them, because you no longer match them. That's the part that feels almost unreal. You don't fight your way out. You outgrow your way out. And suddenly, things that used to trigger you don't even reach you anymore. Not because you're stronger, because you're aligned, and alignment filters your reality. But here's where it tightens again, because right before that full shift happens, there's one more layer, one more moment, one more choice. And this one, it feels different, heavier but quieter, like everything slows down around it, like time stretches just enough for you to feel what's at stake, not externally, internally. Wait, this is where people rush. Don't do that, because this moment, it decides more than it shows, because this next choice, it's not about what you do, it's about what you identify with. Yeah, that's deeper, because you can act differently once. You can choose differently twice. But who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when it's quiet, when there's no pressure, no urgency, no external reason to change? That's where this moment is taking you. Not into action, into identity. And this is the unexpected truth. You don't become aligned by what you do in big moments. You become aligned by who you are in small, unnoticed ones. That's what locks it in. That's what makes it permanent. And you're right there, closer than ever. You've already shown signs of it. That small action, that pause, that restraint, that awareness, they weren't random. They were glimpses of who you actually are, without the noise, without the conditioning, without the old patterns. And now, that version is stabilizing, becoming consistent, becoming real, not something you access occasionally, something you access occasionally. And once that happens, everything else adjusts. Not because you force it, because it has to match you. And this is where everything starts to connect. That small thing you did, that moment you almost ignored, that shift you couldn't explain, it wasn't isolated. It was the beginning of you stepping into that identity. Fully, not partially, not temporarily, fully, and the moment that confirms it, the one we've been circling this whole time, it's not going to feel dramatic, it's going to feel obvious, like something just clicks into place, no confusion, no doubt, just clarity. And when that happens, you won't need validation, you won't need proof, because you'll recognize it. The same way you recognize that small moment, but deeper, stronger, final. And when you reach that point, You'll understand something that didn't make sense before. Why things didn't work out. Why you were held back. Why you were kept in that in-between space for so long. It wasn't delay. It wasn't rejection. It was alignment being built, piece by piece, until you could hold it, until you could live it, until you could be it. And now, you're not almost there anymore. You're stepping into it, right now, quietly, but completely. And once you see it clearly, there's no going back to not seeing it, not because you're forced forward, but because something inside you refuses to shrink again. Wait, feel that for a second. Don't rush past this. This is where it becomes real. Because before, you could ignore things. You could pretend not to notice. You could go along with what felt easier. But now when something is off, you feel it immediately. Not as anxiety, not as confusion, as clarity, sharp, direct, almost uncomfortable in how obvious it is. And that's new for you, because you used to question yourself, second-guess your instincts, doubt your own awareness. But something shifted. Now, you question what doesn't align. That's a reversal, a complete one. And this is where it gets even deeper. Because this clarity, it's not just showing you what to move toward. It's showing you what to walk away from, without explanation, without closure, without needing to understand every detail. And that part, that's hard, because you used to need answers. You used to need things to make sense before you let go. But now, you're being asked to trust something else, something quieter, something that doesn't argue. It just knows. And here's the contradiction. The more certain you become internally, the less you can explain it externally. You can feel exactly what's right, but struggle to put it into words. And that can make you feel isolated again, like you're ahead of something, but alone in it. But this time, it's different. This isn't the same isolation as before. Before, you felt unseen. Now, you're simply not available for what can't meet you. That's power, even if it feels like distance. And this is where the hidden layer starts revealing itself, not fully, but enough for you to catch it. Because that small thing you did, it wasn't just about you choosing differently. It marked you. Yeah, don't dismiss that. It marked a shift, a clear signal that you're no longer operating on the same level you were before. And signals like that, they get acknowledged. They get responded to. Not always in ways you can track, but in ways you feel. Subtle rearrangements, unexpected timing, moments that line up just enough to make you pause. Have you noticed that? Things almost syncing, not perfectly, but precisely enough to feel intentional. Why now? Why after that moment? Because that moment opens something, not externally, internally. And once something opens inside you, it starts interacting with everything differently. You see differently. You choose differently. You respond differently. And because of that, what reaches you changes. But here's the part that most people miss. You're not just receiving differently, you're being filtered differently. Yeah, sit with that. Not everything can reach you anymore. Not every situation can access you. Not every person can affect you the same way. Why? Because you're not matching those frequencies anymore. And no, don't overthink that word. You've felt it. That disconnect. That lack of interest in things that once pulled you in. That quiet detachment that doesn't feel forced. It just is. That's not you losing something. That's you moving beyond it. And this is where it tightens one more time, because right before everything fully locks in, there's a moment that feels like a test, but it's not a test, it's confirmation. And this is the unexpected truth. You won't feel pressure in that moment. You'll feel calm. That's how you know it's real. Because before, every important moment felt intense, heavy, emotional, overwhelming. This one, it feels simple, almost too easy. And that's what might throw you off. You might think, this can't be it. but it is. Because when you're aligned, the right choice doesn't feel hard. It feels natural. And that's what's coming. A moment where you choose without effort, without resistance, without needing to convince yourself. And when you do, everything we've been circling, everything you've been feeling, everything you've been feeling, everything that didn't make sense before, it will, not slowly, not over time, instantly, like a switch. And you will see it, that nothing was random. Not the delays, not the silence, not the things that didn't work out. They weren't blocking you. They were positioning you, guiding you without forcing you, protecting you without explaining it, leading you without revealing the full path until now. And now, you're not guessing anymore. You're seeing clearly. And when that final moment lands, you won't react to it. You'll recognize it. And that recognition, it changes everything. Not outside first, inside. Wait, stay right here. This is where it finally turns. Don't let your mind jump ahead. Because when that recognition hits, you don't feel excitement. You feel still, grounded, certain in a way that doesn't need proof. And that's how you know it's real. Because before, you chased feelings, you looked for signs, you wanted confirmation. But now, you don't chase anything, you see it, and that changes how you move. Completely. You stop reaching. You stop forcing. You stop trying to make things happen. And somehow, things start happening anyway. That's the shift. But here's where it goes deeper. Because this isn't just about how you act. It's about what you no longer entertain. Yeah, that's the part that locks it in. Because once you recognize something clearly, you can't pretend it's unclear anymore. You can't go back and tolerate what you now see through, even if you try, even if it's familiar, even if part of you misses the comfort of not knowing. You won't be able to stay there, and that might feel like loss again, but it's not the same kind. Before, you lost things you wanted to keep. Now, you release things that no longer deserve to stay. That's a different kind of power. Quiet, unforced, but absolute. And this is where the loop closes. That small thing you did, the one that seemed almost insignificant, it wasn't just a moment. It was the first time you acted from this version of you, fully, without interference, without old patterns slipping in, clean. And that's why it was seen, not because it was big, but because it was true, aligned, accurate. And when something is that precise, it creates a ripple, not loud, but undeniable. And you're inside that ripple now. That's why everything feels slightly different, not dramatic, but shifted, like something is quietly rearranging itself around you. And this is the part most people never reach because they keep looking for big confirmations. They keep waiting for something obvious. But you're starting to understand the language of subtlety, of precision, of timing. And once you understand that, you stop missing things. You stop overlooking what matters. And that's when everything begins to connect, not all at once, but clearly enough that you can't deny it anymore. And here's the contradiction. The more everything makes sense, the less you feel the need to explain it. Because explanation belongs to doubt, clarity doesn't need it, and you're stepping into clarity now, fully. Which means you're stepping out of confusion, permanently, not because life becomes simple, but because you become aligned, and alignment handles what confusion used to, quietly, consistently, without needing your constant attention. And this is where the final layer starts to reveal itself. Not all of it, just enough. Because if you saw the whole picture right now, you try to control it, and control would break the flow. So instead, you're being shown through experience, through moments, through that same subtle pull you've been feeling, leading you without overwhelming you. And that's why this next phase, it won't feel like a breakthrough. It'll feel like continuation, like you're simply moving forward, but deeper down, everything has already shifted. And this is what you were always being guided toward, not a moment, not an event, a state, a way of being, where you don't need to search because you recognize. You don't need to force because you align. You don't need to question because you know. And that knowing, it doesn't fade, it stabilizes, it becomes you. And once it does, everything that comes next, it won't confuse you, it won't shake you, it won't pull you back into old patterns, because you've already crossed that line, quietly, without even realizing when it happened. But now you can feel it, clear, undeniable, final. And from here, there's only one direction left, forward, exactly where you were always meant to go, but not the way you imagined. Wait, this is important. Don't let the word forward fool you, because this doesn't feel like movement at first. It feels like stillness, like nothing is happening, like you're just here. And that's where most people get confused, because they think forward means fast. They think progress means visible. But your kind of movement, it's internal first, silent, precise, almost invisible. And if you don't understand that, you'll think you're stuck again. You'll think nothing changed. You'll question everything all over again. But this time, that doubt won't stick the same. Have you noticed that? It shows up, but it doesn't take over. It tries to pull you back, but something in you stays steady. Why? Because you've already seen too much. You've already felt the shift. And once that happens, doubt loses its authority. It can speak, but it can't control. And that's new. That's very new, because before, doubt was your direction. Now, it's just noise, background, something you observe instead of obey. And this is where it deepens again, because forward doesn't mean adding more. It means carrying less. Yeah, that's the part people don't expect. You're not gaining layers, you're shedding them. Old reactions, old attachments, old meanings you gave to things that never deserved. That weight. And as those fall away, you feel lighter, but also exposed, because you're not hiding behind the same patterns anymore. You're just you, clear, present, unfiltered, and that can feel unfamiliar, even a little uncomfortable. But here's the contradiction. The more exposed you feel, the more protected you actually are, because now you're not engaging with what drains you, you're not stepping into what confuses you, you're not aligning with what misreads you. So nothing unnecessary can reach you the same way anymore. That's protection, not avoidance, alignment. And this is where something shifts again, because now that you're here, now that you've crossed into this awareness, you're about to notice something you couldn't see before. Not outside, inside, a pattern, a very specific one. It's been there the whole time, but you didn't have the perspective to see it until now. Wait, watch this closely, because once you see this, it can't be unseen, and this is what ties everything together. Look back, not at the events, at the timing, when things happened, when things didn't, when things almost worked but didn't. There's a pattern, a rhythm, not random, not chaotic, precise, too precise to ignore. Things didn't fall apart randomly. They fell apart right before something misaligned could lock in. You weren't delayed randomly. You were paused right before stepping into something that would have cost you more later. You weren't rejected randomly. You were removed right before attaching to something that couldn't hold you. Do you see it now? Not fully, but enough to feel it. That underlying structure, that quiet intelligence behind everything. That's what's been guiding you. Not loudly, not in ways you could prove, but consistently. And that small thing you did, that moment you almost ignored, that was the first time you moved with that rhythm instead of against it. That's why it mattered so much. That's why everything responded, because you finally matched it, even if just for a moment. And now you're staying in it longer, not perfectly, but intentionally. And that's enough, more than enough. Because once you start moving with it, You don't have to force outcomes anymore. You don't have to chase clarity. You don't have to fight for direction. It starts meeting you halfway. And this is where the final realization begins to rise, not fully spoken, but felt, that you were never figuring life out. You were learning to recognize what was already guiding you, and that changes everything. Because now, you're not searching anymore. You're noticing. You're not chasing. You're aligning. You're not forcing. You're allowing. And that state, that way of moving, it's what you were always being prepared for. Through every moment that didn't make sense, through every delay that frustrated you, through every silence that made you question everything. It was all pointing here, not to an answer, but to this awareness. And now that you're here, the path doesn't disappear. It becomes clearer, step by step, moment by moment, choice by choice, and each one feels lighter, cleaner, more certain, until eventually you won't even think about it anymore. You'll just move, naturally, accurately, without resistance. And that's when you'll realize you didn't just move forward, you became someone who knows how to move forward. And that was the real shift all along. Not something you gained, something you returned to. Wait, don't rush past that, because this flips everything. This is where it stops being about becoming and starts being about remembering. You thought you were building yourself, piece by piece, lesson by lesson. But what if you were uncovering something that was already there, buried under reactions, buried under noise, buried under noise, buried under everything you were taught to be that never fully fit you. And now it's surfacing, not all at once, but enough for you to recognize it. That feeling, like you've been here before, not physically, internally, like this clarity is familiar, like this clarity is familiar, like this way of seeing isn't new, just returned. Why does it feel like that? Because it is, and this is where it deepens, because that means nothing you went through was to add something to you, it was to remove what wasn't you. Yeah, that's the part that hits differently. You weren't lacking, you were layered, and life stripped those layers, not gently, not comfortably, but precisely. And every time something fell away, you thought you were losing, but you weren't. You were getting closer, closer to this state you're in now, where things don't confuse you the same way, where you don't chase validation, where you don't need everything to make sense before you move. That's not learned behavior. That's alignment remembered. And here's the contradiction. You didn't grow into this. You relaxed into it by letting go of everything that wasn't true. And that's why it feels lighter, even when things are uncertain, even when you don't have all the answers, because something deeper is already settled. And this is where that hidden thread finally starts to show itself. Not fully, but clearly enough, because if you look again at that small thing you did, you'll notice something. You didn't think your way into it, you didn't analyze, you didn't hesitate, you just knew, and you moved, cleanly, without friction. That wasn't effort, that was memory, a deeper intelligence reactivating, and you followed it, even if you didn't realize that's what it was. And that's why everything responded, because you didn't act from confusion, you acted from truth, and truth doesn't need repetition to be real. One aligned moment can shift everything. And you had that moment. That's what you've been feeling, that quiet difference, that subtle shift, that sense that something is no longer the same. It's not your environment, it's you returning. And this is where it tightens one last time. Because once you return to that state, you start noticing something else, something even more subtle. The difference between what's you and what's just noise trying to sound like you. Yeah, that's where the precision sharpens. Because not every thought is yours, not every urge is aligned, not every emotion deserves your movement. And now you can feel the difference. before it happens, before you act, before you engage. That's mastery, not control. Clarity. And this is the unexpected truth. You don't need to fix your life. You just need to stop listening to what isn't you. That's it. That's the shift. Simple, but not easy. Until now. Because now you can hear it. That quiet signal. That internal pull. That subtle knowing that doesn't argue. It just is. And the more you follow that, the louder it becomes. Not in noise, in certainty. Until eventually, it's all you trust. And when that happens, everything outside of that loses its influence. Naturally, without force, without resistance. And this is where everything finally connects. That small action, that moment you almost ignored, that wasn't just alignment, it was recognition. You recognizing you for the first time without distortion. And that's why it felt different. That's why it stayed. That's why it led you here. Because once you recognize yourself clearly, you stop searching outside. You stop waiting. You stop wondering if you're on the right path. Because you are the reference now. And that changes everything. Completely. And this is the part that was hidden the whole time. You were never trying to find the path. You were becoming someone who is the path. And now, there's nothing left to figure out. Only something to follow, quietly, consistently, fully. And you already know what that is. You just haven't fully trusted it yet. Wait, don't rush past that. This is where everything either locks in or slips again. Stay with this feeling, because knowing isn't the hard part anymore. Trusting it is. That quiet pull you feel, it's clear. It's consistent. It doesn't panic, but you've been trained to doubt what feels that calm. You've been conditioned to believe if it's not intense, it's not real. If it's not complicated, it's not valuable. If it doesn't demand effort, it must be wrong. But what if that's backwards? What if the real signal is the one that doesn't fight you, the one that doesn't confuse you, the one that doesn't need to prove itself? That's the one you've been feeling, and that's the one you keep almost second-guessing. Why? Because it doesn't match your past, and your past was built on reacting, on chasing, on figuring things out the hard way. But now, you're not being asked to struggle. You're being asked to listen, and that's unfamiliar, even a little uncomfortable, because listening requires stillness, and stillness feels like you're doing nothing. But here's the contradiction: that nothing is where everything is decided now, not in action, in alignment before action. That space again, that same space we've been circling, right before you move, right before you speak, right before you choose. That's where the truth shows up, and you've felt it, that quiet certainty, that subtle "this way." No explanation, no argument, just direction. And here's the part that's been hidden until now. You don't need more signs. Yeah, sit with that, because you've been waiting for confirmation, something external, something obvious, something that tells you, this is it. But what if you already got it? What if that small thing you did, that moment that felt different, that was the confirmation? Not the beginning, not a random shift, the confirmation that you're already connected to it, already aligned with it, already capable of following it. And that changes everything. Because now the question isn't what should I do? The question is, will I trust what I already know? And that's where it tightens. Because trust doesn't feel like certainty at first. It feels like stepping forward without needing guarantees, without needing to see the full path. And that's where most people stop. They wait, they hesitate, they go back to overthinking. But you've already crossed something. You've already seen enough, felt enough, shifted enough to not go back fully, even if you try. And this is where the final pressure point sits. Not external pressure, internal. That quiet knowing, it doesn't leave you alone anymore. It doesn't let you pretend you don't see it. It doesn't let you settle the same way. And that's not punishment. That's alignment holding you to a higher standard. And here's the unexpected truth. The more aligned you become, the less comfortable it is to ignore yourself. Yeah, that's the real tension. Not choosing wrong, but knowing you're choosing wrong and doing it anyway. That's what starts to feel unbearable. And that's new. Because before, you could live in that disconnect. Now, you feel it immediately. And that feeling, it's guiding you, not by force, by clarity. And this is where everything finally narrows down to one thing, not 10 choices, not multiple paths. One direction that feels clean, simple, undeniable, even if it's quiet, even if it doesn't impress anyone, even if it doesn't look big from the outside. It's right. And you know it. That's the part you can't escape anymore. That's the part that's been building this whole time. Through every moment, through every shift, through that one small action that started all of this. It wasn't random. It was the moment you proved to yourself you can follow it. And now you're being asked to do it again. But deeper, not louder, not bigger, deeper. With more trust, less hesitation, less need for validation. And when you do, that's when everything fully aligns. Not because something new appears, but because nothing inside you resists anymore. And that's the moment, the real one, the one that was hidden behind everything else, where you don't just know, you move without conflict, without doubt, without ducking back. And when that happens, you won't need this message anymore, because you'll be living it, not thinking about it, not questioning it, living it. Wait, feel the difference. This isn't about understanding anymore. This is about embodiment. Because once you step into that state, something unusual happens. You stop needing reminders. You stop needing to stay on track. You are the track, and that changes how everything meets you. Not later, immediately. People feel it. Situations adjust to it. Decisions become faster, but somehow more accurate. And you don't even realize you're doing it. That's the shift. But here's where it gets deeper. Because even as you step into that, there's still one subtle layer left. Not outside, inside. A final hesitation. Not loud, almost invisible, but it's there. That tiny voice that says, "Are you sure?" Yeah, that one. It doesn't come from fear anymore. It comes from habit, from the old version of you, trying to stay relevant. And this is the contradiction. Even when you've outgrown something, it doesn't disappear instantly. It fades gradually. And right before it fully fades, it speaks one last time, softly, almost reasonably. And if you're not aware, you might mistake it for intuition, but it's not. It's echo. And this is where everything tightens to its final point. Because now, it's not about choosing between right and wrong. It's about recognizing the difference between truth and echo. Wait, this is subtle. Don't rush this part, because this is where most people confuse themselves again. Truth feels clean, no urgency, no pressure, no need to convince you. Echo feels familiar. It sounds like you. It uses your past logic. It brings up old reasons that once made sense. But now they don't land the same. They feel slightly off, just enough for you to notice. And that's your signal. Not loud, but precise. Because the moment you can tell the difference, the old version loses its grip completely. Not by force, by relevance. And when that happens, something settles, deep, unshakable, like everything inside you finally agrees. No conflict, no internal debate, no second layer questioning the first. Just alignment. Full. Complete. And this is the unexpected truth. The final step doesn't feel like a step. It feels like the absence of resistance, like something that was always meant to happen, finally happening without interruption. And you won't celebrate it, you won't announce it, you'll just move, cleanly, naturally. And suddenly, all those moments that didn't make sense before, they line up, not as memories, as proof. Proof that nothing was random, proof that you were always being guided, even when it felt like you were lost. Even when it felt like you were going in circles, you weren't. You were being aligned to this exact state, this exact clarity, this exact moment where you no longer need to ask, what's next? Because now you feel what's next before it happens. And that's where it all completes, not with an answer, with a knowing that doesn't leave, that doesn't fade, that doesn't depend on circumstances. And from that point on, everything you do, it comes from that place. Not from fear, not from confusion, not from reaction, from alignment, from truth, from that quiet, steady awareness that was always there, waiting for you to return to it. And now that you have, there's nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove, nothing left to figure out, only one thing left: to keep moving with it, not forcing it, not chasing it, just staying with it. Wait, this is where it becomes real in your life. Not just something you feel while listening, but something that follows you after this ends. Maybe this is the moment you realize that small things about you were never small at all. Comment, "I see it now," if you can feel that shift happening inside you. And if this message found you at the right time, stay connected with Born into Light, because the moment you leave this, the world doesn't change. Your environment stays the same people, the same patterns around you. But you're not the same inside it anymore. And that's where the real test appears, not as pressure, as subtle invitations. Old conversations trying to pull you back in, old reactions waiting for you to repeat them, old versions of you quietly asking if you're still available. And this time, you'll see them clearly, not emotionally, precisely. And here's the shift: you won't feel angry, you won't feel triggered, you'll feel detached, not cold, not distant, just no longer involved. And that's when you'll realize you didn't just understand this, you became it. Wait, notice that moment when it happens, because it will, and it might be so subtle you almost miss it. It'll be in something small. Someone says something that used to affect you, and it doesn't land the same. A situation unfolds that used to pull you in, and you don't step into it. An old thought tries to start its cycle, and it just stops. Not because you fought it, because it had nothing to connect to. That's alignment in action. Quiet, clean, final. And this is where it goes even deeper, because once that happens, you start to notice something else, something almost strange. Opportunities start appearing differently, not louder, not more obvious, but more accurate. Things that actually match you, not things that just excite you, not things that just look good. Things that feel right, without effort, without confusion. And this is the contradiction. They might look smaller than what you used to chase, less impressive, less dramatic, but they carry more weight, more truth, more alignment. And if you're not aware, you might overlook them, because they don't match your old definition of big. But now, you don't need big, you need real. And real feels different. It doesn't rush you, it doesn't pressure you, it doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to prove itself. It just fits. And this is where everything finally closes the loop. That small thing you did, it trained you to recognize real. That's what it did. It wasn't about the action. It was about what it activated in you. The ability to move without distortion. The ability to choose without noise. The ability to recognize without doubt. And now you carry that with you into every moment, every decision, every direction. And this is the unexpected truth. You're not waiting for the right path anymore. You're creating it by how you choose, by how you move, by what you allow. And that means every small moment now matters, not in pressure, in precision, because every aligned choice reinforces everything, builds momentum, strengthens that knowing, until eventually there's no separation, no old you and new you, just you, clear, consistent, unshakable. And when you reach that point, you'll notice something quietly powerful. Nothing feels forced anymore. Not your actions, not your decisions, not your direction. Everything flows, not perfectly, but accurately. And accuracy is what you were always being guided toward, not perfection, not control, accuracy. And now you have it, not fully expressed yet, but fully accessible. Anytime you choose to stay with it. And that's the only thing left, not to find it again, not to rebuild it, just not to leave it. Because the moment you stay with it, everything continues unfolding, naturally, exactly as it's meant to. Even the parts that don't look right at first. Wait, don't resist that thought, because this is where most people break alignment again, right here, when something doesn't match their expectation, because now you're going to start noticing moments that almost confuse you again. Not fully, just enough to test your steadiness. Something doesn't go the way you assumed, something delays again, something shifts without explanation, and for a split second, the old question tries to come back. Is this wrong? But this time, it won't land the same. You'll feel it, that pause, that space, and inside it, something will quietly say, stay. No panic, no urgency, just stay. And this is where everything sharpens, because before, you needed things to go your way to feel aligned. Now, you stay aligned, even when things don't go your way. That's the difference. That's the level you stepped into. And this is the contradiction. What looks like disruption is actually refinement. Yeah, that moment that almost throws you off. It's not breaking your path, it's narrowing it, making it more precise, cutting away what no longer fits. And you won't react the same. You'll notice, you'll adjust, but you won't collapse into confusion. That part of you, it's gone. And this is where the deeper realization starts forming. Not loud, not overwhelming, but undeniable. That everything, even now, is still responding to you, to how you move, to what you choose, to what you no longer entertain. That's the connection. Still active, still guiding, still precise. And here's what you didn't fully see before. It was never about making the perfect move. It was about staying in sync. That's it. And sync doesn't mean everything feels good. It means everything feels true, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it asks you to wait, even when it removes something before you understand why. And this is where it tightens one more time, because now you're being asked to trust even without emotional confirmation. Yeah, that's deeper, because earlier you needed to feel it strongly, that certainty, that pull. But now, sometimes it will feel neutral, calm, almost like nothing, and that's when you might question it. But this is the unexpected truth. Neutrality is a higher form of clarity. No distortion, no emotional noise, just accuracy. And that's where you're moving now, into decisions that don't need emotional intensity to be right, into movement that doesn't need excitement to be aligned, into a state where you simply know without needing to feel overwhelmed by it. And that's rare, very rare. And this is where everything finally locks in, because now you're not reacting to life anymore. You're moving with it, not chasing outcomes, not resisting delays, not forcing meaning, just staying aligned, moment by moment, choice by choice. And that's where the real unfolding happens, not in big events, in consistent alignment. And over time, you look back, not far from now, and you see it clearly, that everything changed the moment you stopped leaving that state. The moment you stopped stepping out of it when things felt uncertain. The moment you chose to stay, even when nothing around you confirmed it. That's when it became real, permanent. And from there, everything else follows, naturally, without force, without confusion, without you needing to question it again. And that's when you'll understand why that small moment mattered so much. It wasn't small. It was the moment you stopped disconnecting from yourself. And once that happened, everything else had no choice but to align with you. Not because you forced it, because you stopped resisting what was already trying to meet you. Wait, this is where it becomes undeniable. Don't drift now, this is the part that was hidden the whole time, because alignment was never something you had to chase. It was something you kept interrupting, with doubt, with overthinking, with trying to control outcomes before they were ready. And the moment you stopped doing that, things didn't suddenly appear. They started revealing themselves. There's a difference, a big one, because when something appears, it feels new. But when something reveals itself, it was always there, just waiting for you to see it clearly. And that's what's happening now. Not everything is changing. You're seeing everything differently, and that changes what you move toward, naturally, without force. And this is where it deepens again, because now you're starting to notice what actually belongs to you, not what you were told to want, not what looked right from the outside, what actually fits. And here's the strange part, some of it won't look like what you expected. It might feel simpler, quieter, even smaller, but it holds more truth, more alignment, more you. And if you're not careful, you might almost overlook it again, because your old mind still remembers what you thought it should look like. But this is the contradiction. What's truly yours doesn't need to impress you, it just needs to match you. And you'll feel that, not as excitement, as ease, as something that doesn't create friction inside you. And that's new, because before you were used to intensity, highs and lows, push and pull, uncertainty that felt like energy. But now you're stepping into something steady, consistent, clear, and it might feel unfamiliar at first, even boring, but it's not. It's stable, and stability is what allows things to actually build, to last, to grow without collapsing. And this is where everything tightens one final time, because now you're going to be given something, not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but in pieces, moments, opportunities that feel quiet, aligned, almost like they're waiting for you instead of you chasing them. And this is the unexpected truth. You won't need to ask if they're right. You'll know by how little resistance you feel, by how naturally you move toward them, by how your mind doesn't have to fight to understand them. And that's your signal, the same one you felt before, but clearer now, stronger, more stable. And when you follow it, something locks in permanently, not externally, internally, a point where you no longer disconnect, no matter what happens around you. And from that point on, everything becomes simpler, not easier. Simpler, because you're no longer split. You're no longer divided between what you feel and what you do. They become the same. And that's where everything finally completes. Not as an ending, but as a shift you don't come back from. Because now, you don't just understand alignment. You live it, you move with it, you trust it, without needing constant confirmation. And that's why that small moment mattered. That moment you almost ignored. It was the first time you didn't leave yourself, the first time you stayed, fully, without pulling away, without second guessing, without breaking the connection. And now, you don't break it anymore. Even when things get quiet, even when things don't make sense yet, even when there's no immediate result, you stay. And that's what changes everything. Because the moment you stay, everything that's meant for you finds you already aligned, not searching, not chasing, ready. Wait, this is where it becomes undeniable in your reality. Don't look away from this part, because this is what you're about to start noticing. Because when you're already aligned, things don't arrive with confusion anymore. They arrive and fit immediately, No internal debate, no second guessing. Just a quiet recognition, this is for me. And that feeling, it's different from anything you felt before. Not excitement, not urgency, certainty, calm, unshakable. And this is where it deepens again, because what's coming to you now, it won't try to convince you, it won't chase your attention, it won't create chaos to keep you engaged, it will simply be there, and you'll feel drawn without pressure, without noise. And here's the contradiction. The right things don't demand your energy, they match it. And because of that, you won't feel drained, you won't feel confused. You won't feel like you have to figure anything out. You'll just step into it naturally. And that's new, because before you were used to things that required effort to understand, effort to maintain, effort to justify. But now the effort is gone. And at first, that might feel strange, almost like you're missing something. But you're not. You're finally in sync. And this is where everything tightens one last time. Because even as this starts happening, there's still one final shift. Not outside, inside. A moment where you realize you don't need to go back and fix anything. Yeah, it hits differently, because part of you still thinks you need to revisit the past, understand it better, resolve it completely, make sense of every piece. But now, you'll see it clearly. Nothing back there needs your energy anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because it already did its job. It brought you here. And here is where everything actually begins. Not before, not back there. Here. And this is the unexpected truth. Closure isn't something you create. It's something you outgrow. The moment something no longer pulls on you, it's closed. And you've reached that point. Quietly, without forcing it, without even realizing when it happened. And that's why you feel different now. Lighter, clearer, less attached to what used to hold you, and more present in what's unfolding. And this is where everything finally comes together. That small thing you did, it wasn't just a step forward, it was the moment you stopped looking back, completely. And from that moment, everything ahead of you started opening, not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. And now you're walking into it, not as someone hoping it works, but as someone who already knows it does, and that knowing, it doesn't leave you. It stays, it guides, it sharpens, until every step you take feels like it was already waiting for you. And that's when you realize nothing you're walking into is new. It's just finally meeting you at the level you were always meant to reach. Not higher, truer. Wait, let that settle, because this changes how you see everything that's happening right now. Not later, right now. Because if this is the level, then everything meeting you here has already been filtered. Carefully, precisely. Nothing random makes it this far. Not people, not opportunities, not moments. So if something is in front of you now, there's a reason. And not a surface-level reason, a deeper one. One that connects back to that small moment. Yeah, we're back there again. But not the way you think, because that moment, it didn't just shift you, it selected what could reach you next. Think about that. Not everything gets access to you anymore. And that's why things feel different, more intentional, more specific, more accurate. And here's the part that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. You're about to be placed in a situation that looks ordinary, almost too normal. And that's what makes it easy to overlook. Wait, don't dismiss this, because this is where everything either connects or gets delayed again. Stay with this. It won't feel like a big opportunity. It won't look like the next step you imagined. It might even feel small, familiar, like something you've seen before. But it's not the same. Not this time. Because you're not the same. And that changes what the moment actually is. This is the pattern most people miss. They look at the situation instead of who they are inside it. And because of that, they think it's repeating. They think, I've been here before, that they haven't. Not like this, not with this awareness, not with this alignment. And this is the contradiction. The same type of moment can be completely different depending on who you are when you enter it. And you're entering it differently now. Calm, clear, unattached. And that's what changes the outcome, not the situation, you. And this is where it tightens one final time. Because when that moment shows up, it's going to ask something from you. Not effort, not struggle. Presence. Yeah, just that. Will you stay in that aligned state, even inside something that used to throw you off? Will you remain clear, even if the surface looks familiar? Will you trust that what feels simple is actually the doorway? That's the moment, that's the one we've been circling this whole time. Not a big event, not a dramatic shift, a quiet intersection where your old self would have reacted and your current self just chooses, and that choice, it won't feel heavy, it'll feel obvious. And that's how you'll know. Because before, important moments felt intense. Now, they feel clear. And clarity is the highest signal you have. And when you move from that, something locks in completely, not partially, not temporarily, fully. A point where you don't drift anymore, where you don't question your direction every time something shifts, where you don't fall back into old patterns, because they don't even register the same. And this is the unexpected truth. That moment you're about to face, it's not testing you, it's confirming you. Confirming that you've already changed, that you're already aligned, that you're already moving at the level you were meant to reach. And once that confirmation happens, there's no more waiting, no more wondering, no more looking for signs, because you become the confirmation. And from there, everything moves faster, not rushed, aligned. Things connect quicker, decisions unfold cleaner, paths open without resistance. Because now, there's nothing inside you interrupting it. And that's what changes everything. Not what's happening around you, what's no longer happening inside you. No conflict, no hesitation, no split between what you feel and what you do. Just movement, clean, direct, accurate. And when you reach that point, you'll look back at that small moment, the one that started all of this, and you'll finally understand it wasn't small at all. It was the exact point where everything began aligning with you, not against you anymore, not delayed, not confusing with you. Wait, this is the part that explains everything. Don't let your mind wander now, because this is what you've been trying to understand without realizing it. Because for so long, it felt like life was happening to you. Things didn't work, people didn't stay, timing never matched, and you carried that weight, quietly. You didn't always say it out loud, but you felt it. Why does this keep happening to me? And no answer ever felt complete until now. Because now you can see it differently. It wasn't happening to you, it was happening around you, while something inside you was being aligned first. And that changes everything. Because if that's true, then nothing you went through was wasted. Not a single delay, not a single moment of confusion. Not even the times you almost gave up. They weren't random, they were positioning, slow, precise, intentional. And this is where it gets deeper, because now that everything is aligning with you, you're going to notice something else, something subtle, but undeniable. Things will start working without you pushing them. Yeah, that's new. Conversations flow easier, decisions feel clearer, opportunities don't feel forced. And part of you might pause, because you're not used to that. You're used to effort, to resistance, to having to figure things out the hard way. But now, it's different. And this is the contradiction. When things are right, they don't feel intense, they feel natural. And that can almost feel unfamiliar, like something's missing. But nothing's missing. This is how it was always supposed to feel. And this is where it tightens again. Because even as things begin to flow, there's still one final awareness rising, quiet, but clear, that you don't need to hold on anymore. Yeah, that's the last layer. because for so long you held on to outcomes, to people, to timelines, to how things were supposed to go. And that holding, it created tension, it created resistance, even when you were trying your best. But now, you're not holding, you're allowing. And that changes how everything arrives. Because when you're not gripping, you're open. And when you're open, things can actually reach you fully, without distortion. And this is the unexpected truth. Letting go was never about losing anything. It was about making space for what actually fits. And now that space is there, clear, uncluttered, ready. And that's why things are starting to align with you, because there's finally room. And this is where everything finally completes, not in a big moment, not in a loud breakthrough, but in a quiet realization that nothing is out of place anymore, even if it's still unfolding, even if you don't see the full picture yet. You feel it, that steadiness, that clarity, that absence of confusion. And that's how you know you've crossed into it fully, not almost, not partially, fully. And from here, there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove. Only one thing left: to continue moving as the version of you that everything is now aligning with. You were never overlooked. You are being aligned for this exact moment. If you feel that truth, subscribe, born into light, and walk this path as the person you're becoming. Because this isn't random, and neither are you.